You're watching Morning Express here on KTN, and we are now just about to start a discussion following what has been making headlines throughout the week. I think at the beginning of the week there was a lot of talk on social media, especially about who exactly owns Migingo Island. I'm sure Patrick Gadara has a lot to say about this one. But there's also the issue of the pipeline deal and whether or not Uganda is playing double standards. There's also been the issue of the Jubilee scorecard, where we've been seeing the Interministerial Symposium happening at the Kenyatta International Convention Center, where cabinet secretaries and principal secretaries have been taking stock of what has been achieved the past 3 years of the Jubilee administration. So a number of other issues, but welcome with me, our guests in studio. And my extreme left, I have Professor Orina, who is a media and communications lecturer at the Technical University of Kenya. Welcome to Newsroom. And we also have Roby Koki-Ocheng, who is a senior lecturer at the USIU, that is the United States International University. She is a lecturer of journalism. And we also have Patrick Gadara, communications consultant and cartoonist. And I think we'll have Clay joining us a bit later on the show. But well, thank you for joining us on the show today. It's good to see you all. Thank you. I think we'll start with the biggest story here, which happens to be, well, the Jubilee scorecard. I'm so eager to hear your assessment of this, the past 3 years of Jubilee's administration. Patrick, I'll start with you.
Well, to be very honest, I actually followed in too much detail what has been relieved. I think it's really, much from what I've been reading, been a PR exercise by Jubilee. And well, all good to them. That's partly what they like doing. Some of the things that really jumped out at me were the statements, especially from the Interior Secretary, about us being safer than we were 3 years ago. I questioned these statements, you know, and I questioned what's he using to measure that we are safer now than we were. Are we safer than we were before Westgate, for example? You know, when we didn't think we'd ever be hit, we thought we were safe, and we actually weren't. You know, so what are his metrics when he talks of equipping the police? That itself does not translate necessarily to getting better service. In fact, if you read the Ransley report, which I think I have to mention KTN for highlighting it earlier in the week. The Ransley report speaks a lot about the culture of policing, you know, and about how our police is actually set up. So it's not really just a matter of equipping them. You know, it's really about changing how they perceive their work, that they're not there simply to protect government from citizens, which is how Ransley described it, you know, but they're there to protect citizens. So arming them without actually changing that culture, for me, does not translate necessarily to us being safer.
All right. And Roby, what do you think about 3 years of the Jubilee administration?
I think we must commend government. For many years, we never had a report as such as to progress vis-a-vis manifesto. And talking about goals achieved based on a manifesto really gives us insight as to how keen government is to make sure it has a good record to show come the next election. And maybe one thing I would commend is the idea of incremental monitoring of the activities which are based on Vision 2030, in my opinion. The how and the mechanics, we might not really get into the details of it, but I just think it's commendable that they actually take time off to tell us something about what they have done so far. Whether it is viable or not, or whether it's real or not, at least they're telling us something. Then the second aspect of it would be that last year, after the report, of course, there's a lot of acrimony in terms of the key issues. And I think out of the 23 issues that were mentioned by the president, the media only highlighted the corruption element of it, leaving out all the 22 other aspects of development that the government felt they achieved. So in my opinion, the ministerial conference kind of preempts that. from a risk communication point of view, so that by the time the report is there, people basically can understand where they're coming from. So I think it's a bit strategic in my opinion.
And Patrick, mentions that it was just a PR exercise. I don't know if Professor Orina, agrees with that.
Well, 3 years later, what we call communication or public relations is just but ordinary exercise of, even without that report, Kenyans know what is happening.
Yes.
We had the recent poll by one of the pollsters talking about the diminishing hope of Kenyans and the quality of life going down. So we have had a lot of issues that probably have befallen this country, ranging from talk of maternal health care, talk of education, talk of security, talk of poverty levels, talk of corruption and nepotism, among other things. Well, 3 years later, they have not done, or rather the Jubilee government has not done enough. Yes, there may be flashes of development here and there, flashes of communication in the name of public relations, but then they have not done well enough.
They haven't done well enough.
Yes.
And so, when we look at some of the remarks that were given by the cabinet secretaries, they actually, I did watch Joseph Nkaiseri's, presentation, and he was saying that, while his ministry has been touted as the most, has come out actually as the most corrupt of them all, it doesn't really reflect the job that is being done on the ground. So he thinks that more is being done on the ground as opposed to what, these reports are showing. So is it a misrepresentation of what could be happening, that maybe there's more work being done, but we don't seem to see it?
Well, I've heard quite a lot, and I even heard it again this morning on radio, this argument that the problem isn't really what's happening on reality, it is government's inability to communicate it, that it's having successes, but it just can't communicate it. But this is not true. The fact is, as you mentioned, his own ministry is still ranked as one of the most corrupt. Don't forget, this is a guy who arrested journalists when they went to report on corruption in his ministry, and actually tried to tell us that it's a national security issue. When these things are revealed.
Yes.
But more importantly, I think we need to go back to what metrics are they using. If we talk about the manifesto, then we've got to take the manifesto promises, and put them aside. I think this is what our media needs to be doing. So within 100 days, we were promised certain things. Most of which never happen. Things like laptops have taken 3 years, kids still don't have them. In fact, now the kids who are in class study 1, who are the ones supposed to get the laptops, are in class 3. Are they getting them still? Probably not. This is going backwards. And I think we need to be measuring. When you speak about, again, Vision 2030 as a metric, the World Bank has recently told us that is a dream. That's not going to happen. We know by ourselves, if you look at the Vision 2030 document, it requires that we be growing in double digits, over 10% of GDP growth since 2010 for us to achieve it, to achieve Vision 2030. In 2016, we haven't hit 10% in any of those years. So whenever they speak of 2030, they're being quite dishonest.
Right.
We can't achieve it.
All right, Robbie, I'm sure you have something to add to this. And in this case, how do you think the media has covered the Jubilee scorecard? In this case, have we been interrogative enough? Are there aspects we've missed out on? And if yes, which ones are they?
I think what media has done is to train, other sector players to play to their rhythm and rhyme. In other words, it has made other players decide to use a lot of conflict kind of frames, or to bring out negativity, because at the end of the day you want to sell news, hard news, that follows the rhythm of the man beat the dog. So most of the time people are focusing on how to mitigate negative publicity, and probably not really focus on stories that we really need to be telling after the new constitution.
Right.
Because in spite of all the negativity that we love as Kenyans, we are pessimist by nature and passive-aggressive by nature. And I think there are stories that the media can take time to tell and actually go down and confirm that railway gauge, the railway gauge, how far is it in reality? I mean, I just see snippets of pictures, but what does it take to lay, one track?
One rail,
yes. I mean, some stories that basically can give us insight. And the way media is modeled today is really commercially based. And today, after digital migration, you have to give us content, and that's the content you should be telling us, so that Gavara can know the metrics that they are using, to basically talk about these things.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, and editor for the Standard paper now joins us. This is Clay. Clay, I think you should come sit over here. So close. All right. Thank you for joining us. We started off by talking about the Jubilee scorecard as well, just to see how, as newsrooms, we have covered the entire symposium in this case, and have we also gone along the lines of a PR exercise, just like Patrick described it? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Gavara says it was a PR exercise for the government. I think I'll speak for the media. I think, the government was out there washing its clean linen in public. And I think for the media, I mean, there was nothing much that actually we could do apart from covering it. And I think if it's just coverage, that was perfect. We gave them the airtime, and they said all that they wanted to say.
Right.
But if probably what maybe Gavara wants us to do, to have done, is probably to ask them questions like, okay, fine, so you're telling us that you have achieved this much, but you should have been asking, like, we should have been seeing these things. You don't have to tell. You don't have to tell us. You don't need 4 days to tell us what you've done in 3 years. These things should be visible. Yes, some of them are visible, and probably the government fails to communicate. The communication with this administration has been pitiful. It has been, I think, most of the problems emanate from their poor communication strategy. And you saw the other day they had to appoint somebody to kind of take charge. So probably, if at all they've been communicating these things throughout the 3 years,
right,
they did not need these 4 days, you see. So I think if it's coverage, yes, we've covered. If it's mentioning that actually they're not, if it's mentioning that their communication has not been up to date, I think that one also we've done. Maybe we've not done it as most people would expect, but we've given it our best shot.
All right.
Just to answer what she was talking about now about standard gauge railway.
Yes.
I think sometimes also people do not read or do not watch TV, and they rely so much on. Nowadays I tend to hear people say like, "Oh, I don't watch TV," and then you complain that something is not covered. I don't read newspapers. Actually, standard gauge railway around 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Standard newspapers. One of our senior writers spent a whole week, all the way from Mombasa, following the progress of the standard gauge railway. And we did a series of stories for 4 days, double page spreads from a Sunday, I think, up to midweek. That was, I think, two or 3 weeks back. And then I think last week also, the government took journalists and actually flew them to Mombasa, and then they came back by road. Yeah, so something like standard gauge railway, I think the progress, people have been told about the progress and how far it has reached. Yeah, so the media, the media has done. Yes, so I think sometimes, yes, we blame the media too much for not covering, but it's us probably who don't actually go out.
Actually, I agree with Clay as well.